The way I kind of look at polyvagal theory applied to health is, what are we able to do with our autonomic nervous system intentionally, skillfully, deliberately? And so that starts with really having an awareness of our different shifts in state, right? So first foundational principle for me is that we build some awareness of our autonomic state. And what does that mean? Well, that means that at any moment, we can kind of realize how we're breathing, which is really fundamental. We can realize what kind of muscle tension we might be carrying, particularly in our face, right around our eyes, in our jaw. We can realize and recognize, well, what's my posture like? Am I guarded or am I accessible and open? How am I moving? What are my movements like? What are my own gestures? And if we're talking like I am now, we can check in and what's my tone of voice, right? And all of those things for me can give me quick feedback into recognizing what physiological state I'm in, right? So along with emotions or certain feelings that you might have or sensations in your body, or even thoughts or beliefs, all of those I sort of just look at and I go, okay, well, right now in this moment, I feel pretty calm. I feel pretty safe. Or right now in this moment, I feel mobilized and I'm aggressive or angry, kind of in the fight mode. Or I feel really scattered and all over the place and not certain what to do. That's what I would define as my flight zone. Or I'm really checking out and I'm exhausted and I just want to go to bed, or I just want to go hide somewhere. That would be my dorsal, right? Shutting down, collapse. So the first part to me for health is really tuning into what is our autonomic nervous system sensing and interpreting right here in this moment. Is it safe? Am I defending and under threat? Or am I overwhelmed? Okay, so that's the first piece of health for me. And then the second piece is to really have a nervous system that's flexible, that can kind of move around in different zones. I call them zones, right? So either the safe zone, the fight zone, the flight zone, shutting down, collapse zone. We can kind of move between those different zones with that awareness, but then with some skill and intention, right? So it's a flexible nervous system. It's not always locked in one state. And that's really important because if we look at our different zones from a metabolic standpoint, from an organ function standpoint, we know that whenever we're not in that safe and calm, relaxed state, that felt sense in our body that everything's okay, we know that we're diverting our resources away from optimizing our health and our growth and our recovery, right? Or even our relationships. So we know that anytime we're outside of that safe zone, we're diverting resources to other things. And that, from a standpoint of health, we want to limit how often that's occurring. We're not meant to be locked in a mobilized state, even if it's play. We're certainly not meant to be locked in a mobilized state that's a fight or flight, or shutting down and collapsing, right? In that immobilized state. So I just look at health as this awareness and then this ability to efficiently, with intention and awareness, move and navigate and not be locked in a defensive threat response, whether it's mobilized or immobilized. Does that make sense? So that's kind of my second key piece. Okay. And then really important with all of that is that we are able to be comfortable in stillness. We're able to be okay and safe with just being still. And that's not easy for everyone, right? A lot of us are locked in having to do things and having to keep moving and mobilized. And that comes from a response to, we may have had a dorsal response. And so we begin to mobilize as a way of not bringing in dorsal. Okay. So a third part of health in the health equation for me is that we need to be comfortable with stillness. We need to be able to feel safe in our bodies to rest, to be there, just present without doing much. Okay. So that's a third component. And then another component would be along those same lines is really being able to be accessible with others, especially in proximity to others, right? Being safe and accessible when we're with safe others, trusted others. Okay. And that too isn't necessarily easy for everyone. Okay. So that's another important part. And then another piece to that along those lines of safe is being able to safely mobilize, to bring on some sympathetic activation, some energy, but contain it in safety or contain it in co-regulation such that it's play, such that it's fun, such that it's engaging and inspiring and fulfilling while mobilizing. And for some of us, that too isn't easy. Some of us, when we get mobilized, we bring in too much sympathetic and we get flooded, and then it's really easy to get angry and go into that fight zone or flight zone. So that's another component of health, really being able to mobilize, but contain it in safety so that it's play, so that it's fun. Engage, right? Engage with others and engage with life. And then a last component is that when we do lose it, when we do overreact, or we do highly mobilize and get angry and attack, whether it's at work or whether it's in a relationship, whatever it is, that we can recover, that we can efficiently recover, and we don't get locked in there for too long. And the same with if we immobilize and we start to shut down, or we even have a full collapse, that we know how to mobilize enough to climb out of that, and then how to get back into that safe homeostasis, that ventral vagal place of safety and calm, back to being safe in stillness, or back to mobilizing with enough safety that it's play. Okay, so just to review sort of how health from the autonomic nervous system perspective from my lens is that we have awareness of our physiology, awareness of our autonomic state through breathing, through posture, through muscle tension, through thoughts, through emotions. And then that we can intentionally navigate. We have a flexible nervous system that can navigate those different zones, those different states with intention, with skill, right? And then that we can be safe in stillness and we can be calm without having to always mobilize, right? And then that we can mobilize, but contain it in enough safety that it's play, and that we can be accessible when we're in proximity to others, especially safe others, right? And that we can recover really efficiently and effectively when we lose it, when we overreact, or when we go into shutting down, we know how to get going again. So that's kind of broadly how I look at health from the polyvagal lens. And then I sort of look at the different components of kind of what I've always termed as, well, how do we improve our health? And we go, oh, well, we want to exercise, we want to sleep well, and we want to eat the good foods, and we want, right? So you can look at all of those different components now through this neural lens, and you can say, well, what is it actually doing? Okay, so if we look at nutrition, I'd say, well, if we know what neuroception is, right? We're familiar with neuroception. So neuroception is reading the cues in our environment, in our relationships, but it's also reading the cues inside our own body. So I go, okay, if I'm eating foods that are creating a rapid response rise in blood sugar, or that are creating systemic inflammation, those are cues back to the brainstem that are signals of danger, threat, risk, uncertainty, chaos, which from neuroception's vantage point would say, oh, cue of danger. And that might be enough to send you into a mobilized fight response. Might be, might not be, but it could be. It's another factor, right? So that's where I look at nutrition. As nutrition, we're trying to add safety and more of that, and take away less of the threat and less of the danger. An anti-inflammatory diet. That might be also why it's nice to fast for a few hours, because we're giving our whole system a chance to recover. right? So exercise, same kind of thing. Exercise is a transitory challenge to the physiology. While we're exercising, especially if it's vigorous, if we go back to what I was talking about with metabolism, we're diverting resources away from homeostasis temporarily, and we're challenging our physiology to do something that's challenging, right? But that can be healthy because it's short term. Okay, so that's how I look at all of the components, whether it's sleeping, eating, exercise, and then I look at like mindfulness and sitting in stillness. And again, those are moments where we're actually trying to bring our system back into safety, right? Those are times where we're deliberately saying, you know what, I'm going to help myself settle down and come into that ventral vagal place where I'm optimizing my homeostasis. I'm optimizing health, growth, and restoration. So that's enough of me talking for right now. I want to hear some feedback if you have any. So feel free, Brenton, to take your mic, put yourself on too, and just share whatever resonates with you or doesn't, and we'll start talking.
Was that a cue for me to say?
What's that?
A cue for me to say?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Was that a request for me to?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, please share something. Yeah, share something if anything made sense to you or aligns with your perspective.
Yeah, it made sense. I've spent most of my life from a young part where the world's a bit unsafe. Unknown people are a bit unsafe. It was interesting to notice my spike when the smallness of the group, the intimacy of it when I first joined was, oh wow, there's only a few of us. So there was a spike in a habitual pattern of defense.
Totally.
To be, I guess, a bit retracted, not too forthcoming, to buy myself a bit of time till I could find out if it was safe.
Yeah.
I guess my default's unsafety, and that's how I guess I've navigated in the world, pretty much in an oscillation between mobilizing and shutting down.
Yeah, dude. No, totally get it.
Feeling safe, sir.
Yeah, thanks for sharing
a new
that.
exploration for me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's I get it completely. Yeah. That was really nice to share that. That's really, it's great. Yeah. We've all been there. I'm the same way, right? So that's why this stuff for me is really powerful, because I lived a lot of my life in mobilized threat response, getting a lot of stuff done, but definitely mobilized, right? For sure. That's the power of this. And so just kind of looking at each day as a practice in this. So the fact that you had that awareness, that you kind of, you were having that awareness of that discomfort of, wow, it's a small group, that's the first step. And that was the first component of health, is coming to that awareness. So really, thanks for sharing that. It's great.
Yeah.
So do either of you do any specific breathing practices?
Always.
Always? Yeah.
I'm a yoga and meditation teacher on top of a lot of other things. So
Okay.
that was part of my journey from childhood trauma. Was health and wellness is how I first got myself, out of dysfunction and into nutrition and into running in the 70s before anyone did that.
Anyone did that, yeah.
I was teaching aerobics before anybody did that, but that was a way of getting that, hyper vigilant activity out, right? That now I teach yoga and meditation, but they were always to try to manage the sympathetic drive that I was constantly under. And which is why when you brought this up in the Polyvagal Institute, I was curious, because that's been my path to healing, was, to use those. until I got old enough when, the health and wellness stuff was really, I didn't have the energy anymore to do that. It was taking its toll on me, and I had to find the other practices to get into the parasympathetic state and to restore, because you can only hyperdrive so long before you start, getting illness. And of course, my gut, when I was very early, took it because of the trauma that I was under. So health has always been my passion, and healing has always been my passion. And I've also become a certified somatic experiencing practitioner, and I help people resolve trauma. So, everything you're saying, Michael, is, just what I learned and just what I teach my clients is, awareness. First, you got to bring yourself back into your body and get to befriend it and love it and let it. I say, your body's always keeping you safe if you tune in and listen and stuff. But it's been my path. I mean, health and wellness has been my path to healing before, other things. And so it all makes total sense to me. And it is the path I took naturally. And of course, I learned all about polyvagal theory in my training and have since, worked on more of it when I work with myself, which I always train on myself before I start working on my clients, as I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, we have similar paths. I was doing all the same sort of things that you're describing. And I was originally an engineer and then went into health and wellness and training, and I've owned a training facility for almost 25 years and training others, and training health and wellness and fitness.
Yeah. And that's always been a sideline for me. Like 44 years as a hairdresser, which I got into people's heads. I mean, I love,
absolutely.
I love helping people, and I love the behaviors of people, and I love what drives people. And I loved helping people more than I loved doing hair, especially when they had, issues. But I always recognized that. And I would say, behavior isn't about what we think. It's about something else. And I finally found out that it's really about the autonomic nervous system. And I was thrilled, because I always used to say, I never agreed with the cognitive behavioral therapists and stuff, that it's a thought. And then this is like, no, it's the body. And then we have the organism's response. And then we have this thought, and, the brilliance of this neuroceptive capacity and the ability of us to keep ourselves safe is just phenomenal.
No, it's exactly Steve he's written a paper recently that's so it's called The Science of Safety. And he pretty much sums it all up in one sentence, where he says we're on an enduring lifelong quest to feel safe.
I agree.
Right.
I think he said that in one of the polyvagal groups he was talking in.
Yeah, he probably did, because he's been writing that paper for quite some time. And but that's a sentence out of that paper. And then he goes on to say those feelings emerge inside the body. Right. So now,
it was probably 40 years ago. And I remember, because I dove deep into the self-help books and all the, logistics, and like, I really feel like I'm a psychologist. I've had people say, you've helped me more than 5 years of therapy. But it's like, they'd always say, it's a thought. And I'd say, no, when that door would open, I'd be hairdressing and that door would open, I would know if that person was angry, upset, or safe. And my gut would know what was going on before my head came to any conclusions. I knew that years ago, but now Stephen Porges, bless his little soul, is creating my theory and putting it into practice.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yes.
Oh, that's great.
I've always sensed that, we're keen. These are reptilian brains are instinctually full of wisdom. It's just that most people think the prefrontal cortex is, and I kind of disagree. I think it's a
Yeah.
gorgeous balance when we remove the trauma and come into parasympathetic, and now we have the brilliance of it all. But
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying, Michael, because I have a son who's about to go to graduate school to be a physical therapist.
Okay.
And he's teaching Taekwondo classes, and he just taught a yoga class. And I was like, really? But it was like, I'm always trying, but as a mother, he doesn't listen to me, but I'm always trying to like get him to see the other aspect of it, because the world doesn't teach. The world teaches we're all in our head and this is where it's at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, you know, and if you're upset about this test, let's get into your body and let's get you calmed down. But it's this fascinating thing I've been going through for the last number of years, trying to, I guess, probably educate people which is why I love to go into the polyvagal stuff, because people that are knowing this, they've probably experienced it and they understand it, and they don't look like, you don't know what you're talking about, lady. You have no idea. And I think the world is just going to become so much healthier and happier if they start to recognize the genius and beauty of this autonomic nervous system and the polyvagal theory and all that.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Thanks for sharing. I mean, my profession for the last 25 years is very similar to what you were describing as a hairdresser. I mean, I still work with people that I just today, I see this husband and wife who are 87 now, and I started with them 25 years ago, and I see them 5 days a week. It's not exercise training. It's everything, right? It's all kinds of, and they know polyvagal theory more than most people at this point, you know? So I hear exactly what you're saying. In that relationship that you have with them, there's a real opportunity to actually begin to explore the principles in a way that's actually accessible, right? It doesn't have to be trauma, you know, and that's where, for me, when I first discovered all of this work too, it just made so much sense that, oh, well, this is health and wellness. And then as I started exploring, I'm like, well, this is performance. This is what's between someone, how they can practice and how good they are when the stakes don't matter, and how they can crumble and fall apart when they really take the stage and everything is on the line. That just made so much sense. So that's where I'm coming from too. Very similar.
And as you talk about how you come into the health and wellness field with it, I just was thinking about, just occurred to me that I have always, because I love human behavior and I always know what makes people tick before they do. And that's my intuitive empathic side. But I'm curious, like I've always like kind of, I see someone and I see their personality, and then I wonder, oh, what kind of attachment disorder did they have? Oh, what kind of, you know, trauma did they have that's created this, you know, really perfectionism path, or, you know, whatever the ego path that they've taken, or whatever illness, victim world, whatever it is that they've taken on. I'm always curious, oh, what happened to them? You know, what traumatized their nervous system that created this personality type, this drive, or this, you know, or this collapse and, you know, whatever. And I see everything through kind of a polyvagal trauma informed lens, right? Which is just opened up a whole new world, a whole new perspective.
Yeah. I see that we have Cassie. Cassie, do you want to, are you there? If you are, I just asked you to unmute.
Yes, absolutely. Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah, I just stepped in to hear another hairdresser talking about being a hairdresser.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah, Michael, I listened to your, I think it was probably about 4 weeks ago. And I heard your story and saw the photos of the 80-year-old couple. That
awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
it's really
Yeah,
touching.
no, they're just super. They are, you know, they are a very strong definition of health and wellness, for sure. So What we were talking about, Cassie, before you jumped on, is I was sort of just giving an overview of a polyvagal lens definition of health. And the way I was describing it first is that we have awareness of our physiological state, that we know whether or not we're safe and comfortable, or we're revved up in fight, or we're scattered and all over the place in the flight zone, or we're shutting down and wanting to hide and collapse. And so that's kind of step one. And then the second part was that then we also know how to intentionally navigate. We have some ability to regain control through different strategies that we've learned or through practices that we have. And then the third component was that we have this ability to be comfortable when we're in stillness, and not always have to be amped up and sympathetic, but we can actually rest and recover in stillness. And then fourth, I think, was being able to be safe and accessible in the proximity of others versus being defensive and going into either mobilized or shutting down in relationship. And then the next was being able to mobilize while containing in safety, which is what I call the play zone, so that we can engage with others, engage in life, but not get too amped up and lose control and move into sympathetic fight or flight. And then lastly was when we do have those moments where we lose control and we overreact or we explode and we go into fight or flight, or when we're shutting down, we know how to get out of those states, and we know how to come back into being safe and accessible, or being mobilized in play, or being in proximity with others and feeling safe. So we know how to come back into those places. And that's where we spend more of our time, right? Not all of our time, but that's where we spend more of our time. So that's sort of just an overview of how I look at health from a polyvagal perspective. And then we were just kind of talking through those different pieces. And then I had asked if anyone focuses on breathing at all. And it was yes, all the time. So that's kind of what we've talked to up to this point. So if you have anything you want to jump in and share, if there's anything that I just shared that aligns or resonates that you want to explore more, or something that completely out of there that you'd like to talk about, please.
No, yeah, that's great. No, I super appreciate it. It's beautiful. I really like how you stepped through that. And what's coming to mind for me right now is, I am a hairstylist, have owned an organic salon for 22 years, but I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And, one of the things that comes to mind is what I call the 3 Bs that I use with clients. And it's almost like an auto suggestion, just to kind of see if they can just start to engage in the process and just start getting into flow of my voice. But, usually, and I'm just popping in on the area where, awareness, are you hyped up? Are you shut down? And moving into the ability to regain control. And so the 3 Bs that I use for myself, if I'm hopping on a Zoom or whatever that is the first B is going to be your body. Mm-hmm. And we know, based on the neuroscience of Amy Cuddy, if you bring your shoulders up and slightly look up, your whole resonance in your nervous system starts to adjust, that you're in power. So slightly moving up and just adjusting your body and planting your feet in the ground. The next B is breath, and engaging the breath and just allowing the breath to move down into the stomach and out of the chest. And then the third B is the belief, which is just a number of thoughts we've thought a million times that then become a belief, and just asking a simple question: is this true? What else could be true? And it opens up the peripheral vision and gets you out of the trigger. So those 3 Bs are just a really, really nice way to help people just stop and walk through that process with you, and it adjusts their entire nervous system based on polyvagal theory. So that's just something I'll add there as just a fun tip.
No, that's great. Love it. Yeah. And I love that you're starting with the body and then going into the breath, and then you can come into the psychology. Right? Because that's helping calm whatever might be highly mobilized first. And then that gives you the opportunity to come into the belief, come into the new narrative. So I love it. It's great. It's completely in line with my perspective of polyvagal theory. Yeah, it's good stuff. So when it comes to breathing, right? So there's two ways I look at breathing. So one is conscious breathing. In other words, we're just, as often as we can, we're aware of our breath. We're aware of how we're breathing, right? And because breathing is telling us really quickly, what state am I in? Am I breathing quickly and shallowly? Am I breathing slowly? And, am I barely breathing? Am I holding my breath? So we can be conscious of our breathing as the feedback letting us know, what state am I in? So it goes back to that awareness of state. It's one of the primary tools for awareness of state. And then second to that is controlled breathing or deliberate breathing patterns, whatever you want to call it, whatever your word is for it. But knowing that you can change your breathing with control to shift and navigate. So back to point 2, navigating those different physiological states on demand with intention, right? And then the third thing with breathing is you use different breathing practices as times to either come into stillness, right? As one of those components to bring your physiology into ventral, or as times to mobilize and get some energy going, or as times, if you notice that you are in more of a collapse shutdown, to get some mobilized energy going, just enough to climb back up into safety and comfort. So it's conscious breathing, it's controlled breathing, and then it's daily breathing practices is sort of how I look at breathing. And then if you want to break down the practices a little bit more, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to deliberately do a breathing practice that is a transitory challenge to the nervous system, right? So you've probably all heard of Wim Hof breathing, right? So something like that from a neural lens is a transitory challenge. It's not for everyone, right? But if it's in a safe container and with others who are safe, maybe it's okay, but it's not necessarily for everyone. But that, again, from my perspective, is a transitory intentional challenge to the autonomic nervous system. You're really ramping up, and then you're holding your breath and coming and really kicking in a little bit of a dorsal response, possibly. So that's how I look at breathing, and it's super powerful, and it can be done without a daily practice and just be conscious breathing with some control at times, or you can add in a third component, which is daily practices that become transitory challenges to the nervous system. Any thoughts on any of that? Does anyone do daily breathing practices?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I do a lot of awareness breathing, like throughout the day.
Yeah.
I mean, I train people every hour, set your timer and check in with yourself.
Nice.
How am I feeling? Tension, breath, thoughts, bodily stuff. But I do that just all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that the Wim Hof stuff really, I love to challenge myself, and I always have. So like when I got to 2.5 minutes without breathing, I was like, never could do that again. And I got discouraged and I stopped doing it. But I always want to breathe full and deep, because it's such a state change if I'm not. And so I do breath practices. I teach breath practices, but it's a conscious effort daily to be in touch with where my breath is at, because that's probably the best way I know where my state is at. Because they're just so connected,
Yep. Yeah. So are you all familiar with like what's really important with breathing too, as far as doing practices, is to just understand the basic vagal brake concept, that as we're breathing in, that's when the heart rate would speed up, right? Because we're dampening the cardioinhibitory ventral vagal fibers to the pacemaker of the heart. So we're actually allowing the heart to speed up to its intrinsic rate on the in-breath. Whereas when we breathe out, we're actually enhancing the vagal inhibitory ventral vagal regulation on the heart, on the sinoatrial node, right? So as we breathe in, we can allow the heart rate to speed up, and as we breathe out, we can slow the heart rate. right? So the longer and fuller we take the in-breath, the more we give our heart rate a chance to come up. And then if we made a really short exhale, which is kind of what we're doing in the initial phase of the Wim Hof, is we're taking a powerful deep in-breath and a short full exhale. So we're deliberately amping up. We're bringing our heart rate up through that. And then we're also blowing off a ton of carbon dioxide. So we're lowering our intrinsic carbon dioxide levels, and the carbon dioxide is a signal to breathe. That's what actually tells our body to send signals to the diaphragm to actually inspire and bring air in. So we're lowering our CO2, and that's what's allowing us to hold the breath for that long. But basically the principle is, if you want to speed up your heart rate, make your inhale longer than your exhale. If you want to slow down your heart rate, make your exhale longer than your inhale. If you want to really maximize that respiratory component of heart rate variability, that RSA, that's that cadence breathing where it's equal, right? Have you done cadence or coherent breathing or resonant frequency breathing?
Mhm.
And the idea there, again, it's between 4.5 and 6 breaths per minute. I would recommend that you actually find what yours is, what's your ideal rate. If you haven't, it's pretty simple. There's a number of different devices that you can get, like either HeartMath or the IOM2, and you can just breathe in different cadences and see what optimizes your amplitude of respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And then that can be sort of a go-to practice for you. Pretty simple. And spend a couple minutes in your ideal resonance frequency. That's one other pretty straightforward breathing practice that would pay big dividends. Cassie, do you do any of that?
Yes and no, probably not focused in enough. I mean, I work within breath, but yeah, great ads there.
Yeah, it's as Sharon was sharing, it's just such a quick and efficient portal back into the physiology, and it's such a window of our current state. So and there's a number of devices that can quickly read that. That's something I almost always do with someone, particularly an athlete. Definitely, I want them to know what their ideal resonant frequency is, so that the way I kind of look at it too is, if you're in a pretty good space, so like for an athlete or a performer, if they're actually feel like they're pretty safe and connected, but also they have some energy going, and they feel like it's the right amount of energy for whatever it is they're doing, then that's a really good time to kind of get into that resonance frequency, because you're not slowing down, you're not amping up, but you're really maximizing your respiratory component of heart rate variability, which from a neurophysiological standpoint would make you optimally adaptable. You would be at your optimal level to respond to a challenge or to engage with whatever it is you're doing. So that's how I look at using resonance breathing, or for a general, for the rest of us, just as a practice to kind of almost habitualize that as our normal everyday breathing. Imagine breathing 4.5 to 6 breaths per minute every minute, just in the background, right? Most people breathe between 12 and 16 breaths a minute on average.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this resonance breathing. How long would you want to be in this resonance breathing, and what state are you actually in? Are you in a balanced state of activation and parasympathetic?
Yeah, great questions. When the research behind it, they're showing that ideally, to really optimize that respiratory sinus arrhythmia, that they want you in it for 20 minutes or so.
Sounds like aerobics.
That's a lot of minutes. I mean, very few people are going to sit there for 20 minutes to do it. but what I'm getting at here is I think that is just when you do your hour, you know how you're doing your hour reminder,
Mhm.
that would be a time where just for that 1 minute, I would get into that, right? I would spend 1 minute where I'm counting to myself, maybe
Yeah.
5 or 6 seconds in, 5 or 6 seconds out, 5 or 6 seconds in, 5 or 6 seconds out. That would be one way of getting that in, right? And
Yeah.
just making, what I'm suggesting is that with enough sort of awareness of it and practice, it'll become more of the default pattern, which will help you stabilize in. So that goes to your other question. Are you in this ventral state of calm and bliss? Are you in mobilized? No, I'd say you're in a mixture. I'd say that's a little bit of a hybrid, which is where I want to be more often than not, which is what I call the play zone. The play zone is a blend of sympathetic, but it can be very little. It could just be the vagal brake is off a little bit, so we have some activation, but it's a blend of safety ventral with sympathetic. And then it has a lot of variance in that it can be more amped up, but still contained, or it can be very calm, but still contained, right? So I'd say, yeah, you're more in a blended state versus any of the primary 3 states when you're doing resonance breathing, because you're not actually, your heart rate is going up and down. And when you actually look at it, it actually becomes a sinusoidal curve. It literally, it starts mapping in this. And so you're staying more alert and engaged versus just completely chilling out. So I'd say you're in the play zone.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Which I like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you train yourself to be there and you're going to automatically spend more time there if that feels good.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the other piece of that is I tend to always want to nose breathe. Like nasal breathing is, anytime we're breathing out of our mouth, which breathing out of the mouth naturally promotes a higher breathing frequency, and then which will then signal back saying I'm mobilized. And again, you're getting closer to that threshold of it becoming sympathetic fight or flight. So I would also practice that when you do that check-in piece that you're doing every hour, that you make sure your mouth closed. You go, oh, how am I breathing? And close my mouth.
Yeah,
right. So it's a 2-part. It's how am I currently breathing? Oh, close my mouth and then do 1 minute of that resonance breathing. That would be a great daily on the hour practice.
Yeah, I agree. Really good point about the mouth, because mouth breathers have gotten so good at it, you really even don't know.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Totally.
Can you repeat? It was, oh, sorry, hon. I didn't mean to.
That's
I was
all
just
right.
going to grab, before I forget the thought, 4 to 8 breaths a minute, and the average person takes 20, did you say?
4.5 to 6 breaths per minute is the general guidelines for resonance or coherent breathing. It's between 4.5 and 6. So that would be roughly 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Somewhere in there, okay, is typically what optimizes our respiratory component of our heart rate, which is what we're really after. Heart rate variability is just a general word. What we're really after is the respiratory component of heart rate variability. In other words, how our heart rate speeds up on our in-breath and how it slows down on our out-breath. That's what we're really after, really monitoring and improving. And the optimal improvements, according to most of the research, is this cadence breathing, which is between 4.5 and 6 breaths per minute. What I was saying is most people, when they aren't consciously aware of their breathing, they're breathing between 12 and 16. Some people are at 20, but it's between 12 and 16 is the average breath rate. And that even goes for athletes. I work with a lot of very, very high level athletes. And one of the first things I have them do without them, I just say, just breathe normally and I'll count. And it's not uncommon to be 12, 13 breaths, even as an athlete. But what I'm getting at is that the reason they're so high is because they tend to be locked in a sympathetic, mobilized state, even when they're, quote, sitting there with you.
Mhm.
They're fidgeting, they're twitching, they're not safe in stillness, right? And that isn't ideal, because what Sharon was sharing earlier is that at some point, the body can't sustain the resources that it takes to be mobilized. At some point, the body will have to collapse and shut down, and it'll do it in all different ways,
Mhm.
right? It'll do it in all different ways. So, and even for an athlete, and that's what we're seeing. I don't know if you're aware of, I don't know how much you follow tennis, but I coach a lot of professional tennis players. And so I follow tennis a lot. And there was the Australian who just won the Australian Open, just retired at 25 years old or whatever, after just winning. And what's that? What's behind that? Well, what's behind that is a physiology that just can't support what the demands of how she dealt with the experience, right? So that's what we're seeing.
Your slideshow was incredible on the tennis match, and the visuals of going between the visuals of the people in the audience going into ventral and then the up and down of the tennis player. Man, I think if every tennis player, you could show that to every athlete and record them and have them reflect back to themselves. I mean,
that's how I did that. So I started coaching this professional player in October of 2020. Yeah, October of 2020. And that was what I did, because everything, they're playing all around the world. And I'm like, how am I going to really help him? And so he gave me his direct feed. So the ATP, I was doing all men. So the ATP has a direct feed of every match. So for a year, I watched every single minute of every single match that he played. And that's what I would do, is I would take snapshots. So I'd be on my computer watching the match, and then I'd see something that reflected something that was really important. I'd screenshot it, and then I'd send it to him. And then we'd Zoom, or we'd not Zoom, because they all used WhatsApp. So then we'd WhatsApp, and I'd say, okay, in this picture, here's what's happening neurophysiologically. What were you experiencing? And then what were you trying to do about it? What were you trying to do, right? Or did you realize it? Were you even, right? So that's how that whole slideshow developed, is because I'm like, well, wait a second, every player's doing this. And so then I started looking at other players, and then you can do that in any sport, right? And so you're right. Like, to me, that is like, these coaches. So I've started to work more with coaches, because they have more of an opportunity it's more scalable for me to work with coaches, because they can actually do this in their teams and with their athletes. But that's if once they see it, what they're experiencing, it's like, wow, oh, and they were completely unaware of it, which goes back to our first component again of just awareness. And it's amazing. These are the champions in our sports, or champions in any field, right? Any performance. And they're just doing what they do. They're literally, they don't know. And it might work a lot of the time, but when it doesn't and things start unraveling, they don't know where to go. They don't know what's happening, which is one of the other things that what I'm really passionate about with all of this in the world of performance, is that it's an opportunity for these athletes to become in touch with what their body is actually telling them, right? Because what they've learned is to hide or mask or pretend or rush through, or just not listen to it and just keep driving. Meanwhile, off the court, off the stage, that manifests in all different unhealthy ways, whether it's unhealthy relationships, whether it's addictive behaviors, whatever it is, whether it's quick burnout in their sport. And so the real beauty to all of this is that as they learn to become aware and start building strategies on the court, on their stage, on their performance, in their world, that quote, their work, it transitions into their personal life, transitions into how they're living and breathing outside the court, which is the real important piece to all this. That's really what this is all about, right? So that's the really cool part, especially with really aggressive male dominant athletes who just, it's all to them, it's the fight. They think it's just a big battle until
The
it's
whole world's like that though, Michael. I
I,
mean,
I know the whole
society.
world is like that.
School is about testing. It's about
That's
putting
right.
you in a performance
It
threat
is.
state
That's
constantly.
right. That's right.
Athletics, whatever it is, we're put in
Yep.
this performance threat testing state.
Valuation.
Body
competition.
cannot live
Yeah.
like that.
No, it can't. And so we're not, the way I look at it is, okay, we're not going to change the culture yet. It's too big, it's too much. And we can figure out how to navigate it, right? Without buying into it completely and knowing how to recover, how to get out of it, how to get into it, get out of it, get into it, get out of it. And when we do get into it, not to actually lose control and get overwhelmed by the whole thing, but to know what you're getting into.
Which we go back to awareness and intention. Those are the two basics.
Yeah.
What's your intention? And be aware of where you're heading and going and where you're at. So,
And know what strategies you can employ in the moment. And then let's not forget the biggest piece, right, to all of this, which I even as a younger person I ignored, is the social connections, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't do it alone. You can't, even an athlete. Like, so the one tennis player that I worked with the most for that whole year, that's what he has going for him more than anything, is his relationship with his full-time coach. They were college teammates and they are buddies. And very few friends are coach and player. Like, it's not the normal relationship because it's a little bit tricky. That can also be tricky, but it's their friendship and their mutual trust that carry him to levels beyond what others could do who have his natural ability.
that's where
Pretty
healing
powerful.
happens in a safe container.
Yeah,
That's
he
where
can look
healing
over at his coach and they're connected.
That
completely
coherence
connected.
is connected. That electromagnetic coherence is connected, and that person needs that person, just like in attachment. We need that parent or caregiver to see us. I'm being
Yeah.
seen and I'm being loved for who I am.
And
And
that
that
never goes
happens
away.
even in the adult world.
Absolutely. It
This
never goes away.
never
goes away. And it is, again, it's Stephen Porges's quote, we're on this enduring lifelong quest to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put in parentheses, with a trusted other.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
Right? That's it. And so our quest here is to figure out how we can, the way I look at this then is then how do I add things in my environment, right? How do I add relationships? How do I do my own internal practices? How do I navigate so that I can create this container of safety that gives me that opportunity more often than not?
Yeah.
Right. And then once you have it, how do you then take that in and really actually be accessible, but then bring it in and then access it at any moment?
Yeah.
That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
hey, thank you guys for, and Brenton, I appreciate what you shared. Really, it's really powerful. And I think we all feel that way too. Okay. So I just want to acknowledge that. So, and Sharon, thank you for sharing all of that. And Cassie, so Cassie, you did the Play Zone course?
Play Zone course of yours.
Yeah. Where did you see that slideshow? Are you talking about from the slideshow I did in the other group?
It was in your Zoom. You did.
Oh, in my Zoom. Yeah. Okay. So you did not
It
do
was like a month ago.
Okay.
I haven't
Yeah.
yet. No.
Okay. So what, you weren't here. I was just sharing, I currently have a course that's on performance, that's on PVI, and we'll be releasing very soon a coaching certificate course that will basically give you a polyvagal informed coach certificate that you can say, look, I understand polyvagal at a deep enough level that I can actually share this in a competent way in whatever your field is. Okay, so that's going to be released soon, and that will involve some on-demand like videos like I currently have in the Play Zone course. And then we're going to do there will be 4 75-minute live Zoom group things like this. And I'll do some teaching, and then there'll be some interacting, and then there will be an exam, and there will also be like case studies that you would submit.
Okay.
And then there'll be other materials.
My bandwidth, I can't right now, but I would love to.
No worries. I just wanted to share it. It'll be ongoing. It's not just a one-off. It'll start, and I'll be doing monthly cohorts. So
yeah, so I put my email in the chat if you could grab that.
Great.
And just shoot me an email if you can on that. And then what I'd like to do, I'm going to be putting together a couple small summits, not in the form of like big, hefty, hour-long videos, just like a micro audio summit.
Okay.
And so I'd like to maybe invite you onto that, and then maybe we can set up a podcast and just introduce your work into polyvagal work and get that out there. That'd be awesome.
Great. No, that'd be awesome. Love to. Love to do podcasts. Thanks, Cassie. And thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Brenton. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next time. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.